Hey Bradley, I was going through your Google Drive and I noticed something odd. You were doing what now? I'm sorry, are your ears clogged? I said I was going through your Google Drive. We'll have access to it. Huh. Well, that's news to me. Well, what did you find, Vinton? I noticed you have a folder for something that I've never heard you mention before. I was trying to find things you can cut so you'll work on Devine. I didn't realize you were my personal assistant, Vinton. Oh, I'm absolutely not. I'm just a demigod trapped in a cosmic limbo because you can't seem to stop stumbling into horrible, stressful situations in your personal life. Well, you're not wrong there, my friend. All of that is to say, what in all the seven hells is life is but a dream? Oh, hey, we're talking about Life is But a Dream. I haven't heard that name in forever. Wait a moment, you knew about this one? Of course. Bradley started working on it in high school, just before I met him. Well, to be fair, before I started doing your voice, Arnold. Oh, wow. Is Bradley finally writing Life is But a Dream again? I always thought that story was a myth. Guys, slow down. I haven't even thought about that project in years. I'm still trying to finish my cosmic horror novel.
Life is but a dream is Bradley's precious. Yeah, he's still looking for it.
You know, you two, that's actually not a bad metaphor. Well, I don't wish to derail you even further, but I must admit, my curiosity is piqued. So go ahead. What's the pitch, Mr. Marketing Genius? Sell me on this one. Vinton, I don't think you've ever called me a genius before. And don't get used to it! Now go! Let's hear it! I mean, maybe I'll talk a little bit about it during the writing discussion segment on the podcast. What's that? It's part of the podcast. That's the topic this week. What podcast are you talking about?
Saved as Draft!
You know I love it when everything falls into place like that.
Damn you all! Now we'll never learn about this super secret project!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 76 of the Saved as Draft podcast. This week's episode is another big one. I'd like to start with a quick community announcement before we get into today's agenda. So, fellow author and longtime member of the community, Anton Anderson, just recently announced that he's launching a brand new narrative story this Sunday, July 5th. It's called Queen's Quest, and he's going to be adding new branches every other day from the beginning. So you'll be able to not only follow along, but choose what happens next. I'm a big fan of these kinds of stories, so I had to give him a quick shout out during the intro here. Find a link to learn more in the show notes. Now, for today's episode, we'll start with a community spotlight before diving into this week's shoutouts. After that, I'll take a look at the winner and runner-up from this last week's Wandering Prompt. Now, for those unaware, these are prompts that can appear anywhere inside the episode here in audio form, and the first person to post a link in the comments wins. After that, I'll take us through this week's Power of Prompt stories submitted for that weekly prompt, and we got over 10 of those this week, so I'm really excited. I've even got a bonus story for you all from the recent eco-fiction prompt as well. From there, we'll sit down for our weekly writing discussion on the stories you never wrote. And then, I'll be joined by author E.H. Lau in this week's featured guest interview. This talented author is back on the show this week to tell us about his recently completed comic series, Audrey the Unicorn Girl, so please look forward to that later in the episode. After the interview, we'll wrap things up with a look at next week on Substack. So, without further ado, let's check out this week's Community Spotlight. This week, I'd like to spotlight a new member of the community who I met in the wilds of Substack Notes. Asta Writes Lore is an author who enjoys horror, dystopian, and gothic fiction. They are working on a debut novel while also touring Colorado in search of the best nachos. Now that is my kind of culinary journey. Asta just passed 26 subscribers, and as promised, they posted their first piece on the perfect nachos, which immediately made me hungry. So, whether you're a fan of the genres above, or you know the power of a good plate of nachos, join me in welcoming Asta Writes Lore to the community, and check out everything they've got going on in the link in the show notes. Alright, and next up, it's time for our weekly shoutouts. But first, a quick word from this week's sponsor. Today's episode of the Saved as Draft podcast is sponsored by Storagachi. Yeah, I don't understand. Why is it crying? Well, clearly you need to feed it. It's hungry. Nonsense! It's just tired. Let it sleep.
It wants the precious.
Hey guys, what's that? It looks like the writer's equivalent of a Tamagotchi. Huh, well, you know, that's exactly what it is. Wait, really? How does it work? It's called a Storagachi. It lets you raise your own story until it's ready to hatch. Huh, that's pretty cool. So, what happens when it hatches? You're about to find out! Look everyone, it's hatching! Oh, it's beautiful. What is it? Let me see! Aw, how cute! It's a wandering prompt! Wandering Prompt, Episode 76. Write a story or poem about a mysterious egg and what happens when it finally hatches. 1,000 words or less. First to post a link in the episode's comments wins. Good luck. Ready to raise a story of your own? Get your Storagachi today and start incubating your next masterpiece. Use code HATCHLING at checkout for 10% off. And we're back. Every week on Tuesday, I post a thread in my subscriber chat where you get to share links to your latest work for a chance to be featured here on Saved as Draft or on Mina Howell's Penny Dreadfuls podcast. I pick 5 at random each week for this segment on the show, where I offer my thoughts and narrate an excerpt from each piece. So, let's dive in and see what we got for this week. Our first shout-out this week is Maybe I've Arrived by Namita Call. This was a piece written for one of Adriana Pautina's image prompts, and I know I say this often about Namita's work, but this one might be my new favorite. This poem is about how we shed the past parts of ourselves as we go through life, thinking about what we've left behind, but not realizing that they will always be a part of us. What I love most about this piece is how Namita achieves this metaphor throughout with the use of beautiful and haunting imagery. It's surreal, introspective, and honestly just a gorgeously written piece of poetry. Let's check out an excerpt. Colors deceive, with promises of the wild, that would bring reprieve from the skeletons I've embodied on my path. The mirage shines bright, despite my arrival, the belief so strong that I forget to end the journey. I'm allowed to stop, to declare I'm here, to no one more important than me. Yet, it doesn't feel right. I love it. So much, just in that little excerpt there, you get that taste of the introspection, and then just the wonderful word choice and imagery. I mean, it's a phenomenal poem, and as always, Namita includes original art with her work, too, so if you're not already a fan, check this out. Really, really good stuff, and this, like I said, this is one of my favorites. Our second shout out this week is another podcast. And folks, I gotta say, I'm immediately a fan of this one. This is a series called Half-Baked Tales, where an author reads stories that they've written, but they're basically first drafts. The intro of the show describes it perfectly. The host says that they write and read a story that they haven't thought all the way through. These stories aren't perfect, but that's the point. And I love that. It's a really cool concept for a podcast. This particular episode that I'm featuring this week is a fantasy story about a priestess who will do what she must to preserve a holy cave. It's got phenomenal sound design, great narration, and I think the writing is pretty damn good for being quote-unquote half-baked, as the author puts it. It's great stuff. And I don't have an excerpt here to read you because it is audio, but definitely check it out. You'll find a link in the show notes, and honestly, this show deserves way more love. It's a fantastic concept, and it's really well executed. Our third shout out this week is Raymond Finch's New Service by Robert Collins. According to a footnote at the end of the story here, this piece actually first appeared in Moon Letters number 3, October 1995, which is a really cool detail. And I love this one. It's a short fantasy story about a wizard and inventor seeking work. It combines elements of classic fantasy with some truly inspired world building peppered throughout. This world is one that feels familiar but has magic everywhere, so it's a nice balance of fantasy and reality. And regarding that world building I mentioned, I love how we learn at one point that there's an other Earth without magic, assuming it must be ours. We also learned that at one point the Army and Navy recruit magic soldiers, which is a really cool story in its own right. That blend of fiction and reality goes further as well, because our wizard friend ends up going into business for himself. And he has an idea for a new device powered by magic that will sound very familiar to the denizens of our world. Now, I don't want to spoil the second half here, but as someone who blends fantasy and sci-fi in my Devine stories, this story was really cool to me. Anyone can dive in and enjoy this one, and I promise that you'll love how it ties back into a world we know quite well. It's a fun read, but let's check out an excerpt so you can see what I'm talking about. The business, Roberts' sliding door company, did indeed need help, but they need strong souls to install the doors. They had all the wizards they could use. But the owner took pity on Raymond. Unlike the other men and women Raymond had spoken with, Lawrence Roberts understood his problem. He took the aspiring mage into his office and gave him some advice. Wizardry just isn't as vital a calling as it once was. In fact, you could say that it's a stuffed market, more workers than jobs. And it's true everywhere in the federal states, not just here. Even out in the frontier territories, Roberts added. So, what can I do? Well, you do have some choices, Raymond. You can go back to school, get another degree. You could take a low-paying, non-magical position. You could enlist. The Army always needs magic officers, and the Navy would sink without them. I've already dismissed those options, Mr. Roberts. Well, there is one other option, though it is risky. What? Raymond asked quickly. Go into business for yourself. Excuse me? Start your own business, one that makes a product or provides a service. Find something that you do well or that you enjoy doing. Think of something that people need but that no one's providing. Anything that people are sure to pay you money for and that you can do at a profit. Horseless carriages, for example, though so many are getting into that field right now that I don't think you'd make it. Still, there must be other things. Fantastic stuff, and I like how that excerpt there really shows off kind of what I was talking about. There's mentions of things that we know in our world, but it's reframed in this magical world. It's just a really cool story. It's a nice balance, like I said, between fantasy and reality. Great stuff. Really enjoyed that one. Our fourth shout-out this week is Truly I Would Not Change It for the World by Beck Rowan. This is a short poem with narration included as well. And again, the audio quality here is insanely good. I have to shout out the performance too. The way the author reads the lines here brings out such rich emotion that I would say listening to this is practically a requirement. Now onto the piece itself. This is the kind of poem where every single line lands perfectly and the message resonates beautifully throughout. It knows exactly what it wants to say, and it says it without hesitation. Dare I say this is nearly perfect. I wouldn't change a single thing. Let's check out a quick excerpt. Yet keeping change from those who need it most is like to suffocate a gorgeous world, where minds and hearts and universe are whole, and binaries all melt to loftiness. For now is single love shunned from regard, and marriage sits enthroned above the rest, in rigid links of expectation, which were not made for universal forge. I mean, wow, I got chills just reading that. You can see some of the messaging there and some of the broader sort of, kind of themes of the poem in that little excerpt, but I mean, I did not do it justice. I tried, but honestly, the author's performance here far outshines what you just heard from me. So please, head to the show notes, check it out, you'll find a link there, and definitely listen to that audio. Our fifth shout out this week is A Quiet Moment by Sarah Tinney. Now, I've said this many times before, but Sarah is an absolute master of short-form fiction. She once again showcases that here with this story about parenting and the universal need to decompress. Now, I myself am a dog and cat dad. I don't have any little human children, but those four-legged kids of mine tend to keep me pretty busy. And if it's not them, life certainly knows how to throw me through the ringer time and time again, as you well know. So, if anything, I can resonate with that need to decompress. Quiet moments where no one expects anything of you are so rare, and it's important to appreciate them. Sarah's story is about that. It's only 2 paragraphs, but it captures that kind of quiet, calm moment that we all hope to find at least once per day if we can. It takes a truly experienced author to establish tone, atmosphere, and a sense of place in just a handful of words, but Sarah's done it once again. Let's check out an excerpt. Later that evening, she curled up on the couch. She had her book, and the cat was curled up, purring by her side. It had been a long day looking after a sick toddler. There were lots of cuddles, some medicine, and more screen time than she would like to admit. But that's about all she has the energy for when she's unwell. Why would she expect different from such a little body? Amazing work from everyone this week. And a huge thank you to all the new authors who submitted links. I love discovering new writers through this segment. So remember, if you want to have your work featured on the show here, keep an eye out for my weekly shoutouts thread in my subscriber chat every Tuesday. All right, we'll take a look at our winner and runner-up from last week's Wandering Prompt next. Oh, hey, wow, the Wandering Prompts are back. Yeah, this is the award ceremony. Did you not get the memo? No. Did Bradley post it on Substack? No. He hid the audio in the podcast. Much like he does with the Wandering Prompts themselves, now that I think about it. Ha! Of course he did. Well, at least he's consistent. All right, everyone. Welcome to this week's Wandering Prompt Award Ceremony. This week, our winner was Alden Crow with a poem titled The Lives I Want. Hey, guys, I'm here. Thanks for getting started. Oh, you're here in person. I figured you would have left us an audio file. What? It's nothing. Go ahead. Alright, well, Alden is a writer I recently discovered, and as the announcer said, this was the first piece submitted for last week's Wandering Prompt. The prompt itself was a Sylvia Plath quote. The poem here is fantastic. It acts as a conversation with Sylvia and directly addresses her concerns in the quote that I used for the prompt itself. And given that I do extended excerpts here, I'm going to read the full poem now for you all. Here is The Lives I Want by Alden Crow. How many lives must one live to be a poet, a grower, a baker, a maker of wooden things? Yes, we can live many lives, for life brings different times. As a child, a pilot, in dreams escaping a riot. As a teen, a rock star, a bed is a stage, holding a guitar. It is not an impossible taunt. It's before you in a dream, vivid and serene. Moments left for you to behold, a future maybe foretold. I have lived many lives. My dreams have truly been alive. Awesome work from Alden this week, and congratulations to him again for winning last week's Wandering Prompt. Now, we do have a runner-up this week as well. Jennifer Jorgensen wrote a piece and submitted it a few days after the last episode went live. It's called Infinite Library, Finite Life, which is an amazing title in its own right. The concept here takes the Sylvia Plath quote and says, okay, well, what if you could live inside the stories you read? Jennifer always has the best concepts for her work, and this one is no different. Here she dives into the worlds of both modern and classic stories, realizing that she can influence and change the events. It's a story about branching narratives, and you know I love those, so this one immediately drew me in. I love the wide range of stories she references and the worlds she visits here. As always, she capitalizes completely on the concepts that she invents, which is why she's one of my favorite writers on Substack. Now let's check out a quick excerpt so you can see what I mean. There were modern thrillers, fantasy epics, horror, science fiction, poetry, romances, entire worlds waiting behind a tap of my finger. I idly wondered if poetry would work. There was Shelley's Frankenstein, where I could be the kind of friend the monster had so desperately needed. There was Stoker's Dracula, where I could explore the horror and beauty of a nightlife that never ended. Spotting King's The Stand almost decided it for me. The idea of spending time with the characters I loved, warning them about the walking dude, maybe even saving their lives. It was intoxicating. Intoxicating indeed. And a big thank you to Alden and Jennifer once again for submitting entries for last week's Wandering Prompt. Now remember, these Wandering Prompts are special prompts hidden in the episode's audio here, and the first person to post a link to their entry in the show's comments each week gets the winning slot in this segment. Now that we're done here, let's move on to our next segment, which of course is a look at this week's Power Up Prompt Stories. All right, this week's Power Up prompt was romance. Each week on Sundays, I post a new Power Up prompt with a poll where you can vote on next week's genre. Each week's Power Up prompt includes 3 elements: a setting, a character, and a conflict. Now, before I get into this week's entries, I have a story submitted here a few days ago for the eco-fiction prompt that I did a few weeks back. Gaia's chosen messenger herself, Mina Howell, wrote a story that I'd love to talk about here. It's called The Right Man for the Job, Part 1. Now, I call Mina Gaia's chosen messenger in addition to a bunch of other nicknames I've given her since we met, because, in this case, she's the one who introduced me to eco-fiction. This concept that stories can show what happens when people disrespect the planet they call home. What happens when hubris leads to destruction and there's nowhere left to run. It's powerful stuff. In this story, Mina introduces us to the protagonist through the use of a first-person POV that reads like the journal or internal thoughts of the main character. It puts us directly in their mind, letting us see and know exactly what they're thinking. Now, I love this kind of immersive storytelling because it pulls you right into the world. And what a world it is. My jaw hit the floor when Mina revealed that the putrid delta from the prompt in this story became a place where the civilization in this world started burying their dead. Apparently, they used to say, and I quote, "The delta shall ferry us to the afterlife." Now that is a concept. And the story takes us into the delta only for an accident to make it seem like our protagonist's fate is sealed. Just when we think it's all over, though, they wake up in one of the most brutal cliffhangers that I've read in a while. I'm very, very eagerly waiting part 2 here, but this was a killer entry. So, shout out to Mina again for showing us why she is the master of eco-fiction. And now, we'll dive into the stories submitted for this week's romance power-up prompt. Your setting this week was the Forlorn Island, your character, the Lonely One, and your conflict was starting over. Fun fact, this week's prompt was inspired by a planet featured in my poetry collection that I published earlier this year, called Beauty in the Ending, Poetry for Dying Worlds. The goddess from the prompt here is Lenara, which is the name of the world in my collection where souls are always born in pairs. So, little fun fact there, but let's dive in and explore the romance stories submitted for this week's prompt, shall we? I'll offer up my thoughts on each one and what stood out to me. First up in this week's power-up prompts is Tears of the Twain by Gregory Blair. Gregory once more turns in an incredible story this week. He uses the elements of the prompt to weave this beautiful backstory that adds rich detail into how and why souls in this world are born in pairs. And I love how he took things to the next level down there. The story of our protagonist, whose name translates to the Lonely One, another great reference to the prompt, is one of sadness and confusion. They don't know why they were born alone. But when they find the answers they seek, Gregory offers us a beautiful story of how love endures beyond the bounds of cruelty that the universe is often known for. It's amazing work, and a fantastic way to start off our stories this week, so shout out to Gregory. Our second power-up prompt story this week is What Remains by J.M. Gooding. Yeah, I always feel like I need to brace myself before I start reading a J.M. Gooding story, especially one in an emotionally charged genre like romance. Now, for those unaware, this is an author whose work will grab every ounce of your attention, and it won't let go until it's done. If you're lucky, he'll spare your heart the pain of loss or grief, but don't ever assume that. That'll be your first mistake. So, with this story, J.M. took us on a really cool approach to the prompt. In this piece, the story is told from the perspective of Lenara herself, who's essentially become the Lonely One from the prompt. Now, I've come to expect this kind of creativity from J.M., but he still manages to surprise me every time. The writing here is stunning as always, but there's a few lines that really stood out to me. Just profound stuff that works just as well on its own outside the context of the story. Lines like, "Divinity is often mistaken for certainty. It is not. I did not foresee what loving a mortal would demand of either of us." Just that right there, beautiful. And this combination of mortal and immortal lovers, it takes me back to one of my favorite games of all time, a JRPG on the Xbox 360 called Lost Odyssey. That one was about characters who were immortal, and it explored all kinds of different ways that they have felt loss as the world moved on without them. And mercifully, JM does not destroy your heart and soul by the end here. He'll probably make you cry, don't get me wrong, but again, that's par for the course. Here, though, we do get a satisfying ending that I think everyone will enjoy. So be sure to check this one out. It's fantastic work from an author who always turns in incredible stories for my prompts. You'll find a link to all of these in the show notes. Our next power-up prompt story this week is Good Luck, Written in Blood by Genesis McClure, aka Every Root, Every Thorn. So, as I've mentioned before, this author has a multiverse of stories, and they always manage to make their power-up prompt stories fit into that larger narrative. The writing here is so good. It's well-paced, the banter is hilarious. You'll start off reading and wondering what the heck is going on, only for the elements of the prompt to suddenly start dropping in one by one until you find yourself in the midst of a power-up prompt story. It's brilliant, and it flows together wonderfully. And I feel like every week, I also find a line in one of this author's stories that just makes me laugh like crazy. This week, that line had to be this one. It reads, "I guess he is probably some hoity-toity noble with resting bro face." The resting bro face really got me. That was good. But seriously, this is a fascinating world full of action, comedy, intrigue, and in this case, romance too. Something for everyone, truly. So check it out at the link in the show notes. Next up in this week's Power Up Prompt Stories is A Love Transformed But Never Extinguished by Leron Haywood. Now, I love it when Leron joins in on the prompts because their stories always hit the mark. It's the perfect balance of what's provided with tons of new ideas that really bring it to life. And here, the story begins with our protagonist wandering into the tomb of Lenara, the goddess. They are exhausted after a lifetime of loneliness, but soon they discover that unlike the priests in the tomb, they can look upon the goddess's true visage and bask in her light. That's our first sign that this character is someone special. But from there, we learn about how they've changed in their rebirth since they first knew the goddess. It all cascades into this really beautiful and heartfelt ending that had me crying tears of joy. If you love a good love story, this is practically required reading. It's phenomenal work from Leron, as always, and a great story this week. Find a link to check it out in the show notes. Our next power-up prompt story this week is The Forlorn Island by Mary Ellen Brady. With this piece, Mary Ellen drops us right into the moment when our protagonist approaches the statue of Lenara. They are confused, lonely, and seeking answers. It's a great starting point, and it quickly gives way to an exchange that offers both hope and uncertainty in equal measure. What I love about this story is how it relies not only on dialogue, but what happens between each spoken line as well. There's almost two conversations happening simultaneously in this story. One where the characters are speaking to each other, and another where their body language is having a discussion all its own. I also love the final two lines of dialogue here where Tara says, "I have questions," and Lenara replies, "I have time." Beautiful. Beautiful work. Check the show notes for a link. Love Mary Ellen's entries every week. Our next power-up prompt story this week is Weeds Found in Eden by Jorving. And I gotta say, this one completely caught me off guard, in the best way possible. Jorving's work is always immensely atmospheric and rich with detail, but here, they took things in a direction I haven't seen from any of the other entries this week at this point in my reading. Where most of the stories from the prompt leaned into this idea of lovers separated by lifetimes, focusing on loneliness, regret, and sadness, Jorving reminds us here that among all those emotions, rage and anger can often bloom as well. That element of resentment here takes things in a wild direction that I absolutely loved. The story is broken up into quick vignettes, allowing us to perceive the passage of time and to really feel the resentment growing as the story goes on. Now, I don't want to spoil things here because that unexpected turn is really something I think you should experience for yourself. But I have to say, I love how the story begins and ends on the same line as well. It's little flourishes like that really make a story stand out for me. But yeah, in terms of sheer creativity with the prompt provided, Jorving takes home the gold star this week. I did not expect a take like this, and I love everything surrounding it. I'm just really glad that I got to experience it. Another incredible piece from this author. So please run, don't walk, to the show notes and open the link so you can read it later. I promise you won't regret it. Next up for this week's Power Up Prompt Stories is Scott by Laurie McIntosh. This was a fun one. It begins with our protagonist Scott having a conversation with Lenara as she tries to desperately remind him they are lovers and soulmates. Scott, naturally, is very confused and tries to pump the brakes. It makes for hilarious dialogue, and just when it seems like they've come to an understanding, things go right off the rails again. I gotta say, I didn't expect the ending either, but this was another fun one from Laurie that highlights some truly exceptional dialogue. And a fun side note, but the use of the word acquiesced here is really well done. That's one of those complex verbs you don't see very often, so when it does pop up, I like to shout it out. And it's really cool to see it used in a modern story like this, just so naturally. So great work from Lori, great writing, and hilarious dialogue. Find a link to this one in the show notes. Next up this week is a debut author for the Power Up prompts. It's Wannabe by Leanne Schaller. This is one heck of a debut as well. Leanne gives us some context for the piece here and how she believes this idea deserves a slow burn novel treatment. And after reading her entry here, I would agree. This honestly would make for a fantastic novel if expanded upon. Even so, what Leanne has accomplished here in the span of a few thousand words is very impressive. Her writing style is incredibly polished. It's rich with detail, and all that means that it's insanely atmospheric as well. The pacing is smooth, the dialogue is sharp, and the way she develops complex characters this quickly is really impressive. Every element here shines beautifully on its own, but taken together, you have a true work of art. It's exceptional work. And like I said, an amazing debut from this author for the Power Up prompts. And clearly, she has a lot of other work I need to read because I love this piece and I want to read more. So do yourself a favor and check it out because I promise you won't regret it and you may find yourself a fan of this author by the end. Links in the show notes, of course. Next up this week is another debut author for the Power Up prompts with The Lonely One, an epic poem by the Faraday Room. Now, according to the author here, they don't normally do prompts, so I'm truly honored they decided to try out one of mine here. Let's dive in and check it out. For starters, I love the epic poem style here. It works really well, and the author has a very strong sense of rhythm and flow, so it truly feels like the kind of story you would hear narrated out loud by a traveling storyteller. And another unique element here is how this piece is meant to be a cautionary tale. The Lonely One here is someone who desperately wants connection and companionship, but not all pairs are meant to be together. Toward the end, the poem explores how, despite them being lovers in a past life, these current versions of themselves simply aren't compatible. The lesson, of course, here is that being alone doesn't mean it's a failure on your part, or, sometimes forcing a connection between two people that don't fit together is perhaps a worse fate. It's really interesting stuff, and honestly, shout out again to the Faraday Room for taking the time to try out one of the prompts. I love this one. Fantastic read. Our next Power Up prompt story this week is The Kiss of a Shadow by Terrifying Tales, aka CJ Knight. This one has a really strong opening. It paints the premise of the prompt, but it adds a unique element in that all the pairs in this world cannot live if the other one dies. Known as the rule of half, this means that if your partner perishes before you, then you will be put to death as a mercy in their eyes. And that is brutal, but it makes sense given the world that this takes place in. There's an order known as the Lex that enforces this, and it's such a cool addition to the prompt. Like I said, none of this was included in the base prompt, but it makes perfect sense. And this transitions beautifully into our protagonist, who is part of the Lex. Things quickly hit the fan when our protagonist meets Lenara and identifies her as someone without a partner, not knowing that he himself is her soulmate at this point in the story. The multi-layered conflict adds so much tension and weight to the story here. Once you add in CJ Knight's iconic imagery and breakneck action, this quickly becomes one of the best stories I read this week. It is firing on all cylinders, and it gave me chills by the end. Incredible work. I was blown away by this one. Please, please, please check this one out at the link in the show notes. All right, and our final Power Up prompt story for this week is Destiny Gets Its Comeuppance by Bradley Hurt. This is an excellent entry to end the week's stories on because Bradley took a unique approach here. We open with anger as the Lonely One yells at the statue of Lenara, cursing her for promising to take away everyone's pain, but leaving her alone. When Lenara wakes and tells the Lonely One the truth, we expect them to reconcile, but instead, the Lonely One sees this for what it is: manipulation. Lenara confesses that all this was for her benefit, that it all had been planned. The Lonely One feels justifiably used and mistreated, so they choose to rebuke the goddess's love. It's fascinating, and honestly, a pretty realistic take on the prompt here. We all want love and companionship, but we shouldn't accept it at the cost of our own dignity or happiness. If the only love offered to you is a toxic one, we should all hope to have the strength to refuse that, and realize that in that case, we'd be better off alone. So, check out Bradley's excellent take on the prompt here, and peruse all the entries for this week in the show notes. Our next Power Up prompt will be out tomorrow, July 5th, and I look forward to seeing what you do with this next one. And now, we'll dive into this week's writing discussion, but first, a quick mindful moment. Hey there, this is Chill Bradley, here with this week's Mindful Moment. Here's a quote to consider. It does not matter how slowly you go, as long as you do not stop. Confucius. Now, this is a classic quote, but it's a classic for a reason. I often say that everyone's on their own timeline, their own creative journey, if you will. Looking around at where everyone else is and wishing you were there with them is a fast way to burn yourself out. Instead of worrying about how you compare to others, this week I want you to focus on the ground in front of you. I want you to focus on your next steps. What you're doing to move closer to your goals as a writer, an artist, or any other kind of creative. Because remember, success does not arrive overnight. It comes from countless late nights of work and the strength to keep going no matter what. So don't worry about how fast or slowly you're reaching your goals. Instead, focus on making progress toward them every day, however much you can. Thanks for listening. Back to the show. And we're back. This week's writing discussion topic was all about the story ideas you have but have never written. I've got one of those I mentioned during the cold open of the episode. It's a story called Life is But a Dream, and it's the first major story that I ever tried to write back in high school. That first draft was hundreds and hundreds of pages. It mixed fantasy, horror, sci-fi, you name it. The concept centered around this creation myth that revealed that our universe is merely a stepping stone toward our final destination for our souls. And it also revealed that our souls were being targeted by forces beyond our understanding. It's your classic hero's journey that begins with someone entirely unaware of their destiny, only for them to learn the secrets of the universe and be given the burden of saving everyone. It's not the best pitch, but it's truly the most ambitious concept that I've ever imagined, even to this day. And as part of the discussion this week, I asked you all why you haven't written that story of yours. So I'll answer first here in regards to Life is But a Dream. The simple truth is that I remember how much people loved reading that draft back in high school, but even now, I struggle to believe that I'm a good enough writer to do it justice. So I've put it off for well over a decade while I try and fail to write my cosmic horror novel instead. Will I get back to Life is But a Dream one day? Maybe. I'd like to think so. I've learned a lot about myself in my writing, even in the time since I joined Substack, so I'm closer than ever to being quote-unquote good enough to write this idea, but that's all I'll say for now. It's a complicated topic. And now remember, as we get into the answers for this week, if you take the time to respond on these threads each Wednesday in my subscriber chat, I will take the time to read your responses right here on the show. So let's dive in and see how everyone else answered this age-old question. First up, Wendy Russell says, "Ooh, love this one, Bradley." Thank you. She says, "Well, I love all your questions, but this is such an interesting one, and I'm looking forward to hearing everyone's responses. For me, I'm writing the thing already. Rocking the Second Act is the story I've always wanted to write. Some of the characters have existed with me since I was a teenager in various forms and in a range of genres, so it's a deeply personal story. It explores a lot of themes that I have held close, struggled with at times, and RTSA is my way of processing them. Honestly, I don't think I was ever going to be fully ready to write this, so 2 years ago, I just started doing it. And as of July, it'll be a year since I started posting it on Substack. I would encourage everyone that if you have a story you dearly want to write, just write the thing. It may be that you are never ready." Man, Wendy, why you gotta call me out like that? I'm just kidding. No, it's true though. Wendy offers great advice here. I've actually read a bit of RTSA, so I love that is, the kind of magnum opus for Wendy that she's been, trying to write or thinking about for a long time. So this is a beautiful answer and extremely on point for what I was just saying. So thank you, Wendy. That was a phenomenal way to start our discussion this week. Next up, Leanne Schaller says, "Like Wendy, the current whip is one I never thought I'd be ready to write. I've had a stab at it, and because nobody wanted it, I threw in the towel. It's feeling like the most vulnerable of my stories, even though I could not be further removed from a 4th century Britain warrior. Plus, I'm worried I'm not going to be able to evoke the era, steeped in Regency era stuff as I am, but that's what revisions are for, I guess." Really good points here from Leanne. One of the reasons why I myself haven't really gotten into historical fiction is because I'd be worried that I wouldn't capture the era right. But I think Leanne brings up a great point. I think Readers of that genre will obviously expect that to an extent, but they're really, like anybody else, they're there for a good story. And I love the concept here. And I also think that Leanne makes up a really good point in saying that revisions are the place for that. I think if you get the right beta readers, the right, maybe subject matter experts, stuff like that to take a look at the draft, you'll be able to get in those details that you're worried about not having. I think at this point in the first draft, you're on the right track by just focusing on the story. So great answer there from Leanne. Next up, Mina Howell says, half of me wishes that I would have waited to write Ophiocordyceps until I was more seasoned as an author, but the other half is like, it wouldn't be the same story if you'd waited. And I feel like that second half has a really good point. If we wait until we're ready, we'll be waiting our entire lives. The thing you write will be so uniquely yours anytime that you write it, and that's what makes it so special. Another view would be to say that we write things at the exact right moment for us, and whatever it becomes was what it was always meant to be. I hope this makes sense. I'm still half asleep. Well, no, Mina, that does make sense. And like Wendy, it calls out directly what I was saying in my own answer. Some really good points here, honestly. I mean, it's so easy to get swept up in, it's a big grand idea. Is it really something I can do? Do I have the talent to do it? But to Mina's point, whenever you write it, no matter when, it'll always be your story and written the only way you can write it. And I think that is a really powerful point, and honestly something I should consider too. So really, really good stuff there from Mina. Fantastic response. Next up, Silken Mooley says, if you'd asked me this last year, I'd have had a whole book full of the things to throw at you. Then I realized if I didn't write them, I would probably die a corporate slave, unfulfilled, and these ideas and characters would probably die with me. Today, however, my answer to your question is nothing, because I have/am writing it all. When the usual imposter syndrome pipes up, I shout at it to shut up and keep writing anyway. I will still likely die a corporate slave, but at least now something of me will live on after I'm gone. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Powerful response here. Also, again, I feel like all these responses are directed right at me because I myself have been working in a corporate position for almost a decade now, while also trying to write. So yeah, I mean, really, really good points here. I love that Silken here is just diving in, writing the thing, and yes, they're absolutely right. No matter what happens in this life, these stories will live on. So that is a fantastic response. And for what it's worth, my friend, I hope and believe that you'll be able to do this full time. I think that's what I'm hoping for all of us. And I think all of us have truly unique and special ideas that will resonate with the world. They just need to find their audience. So keep at it, my friend. Next up, J.M. Gooding says, I've always got a backlog of ideas I want to develop. Some of them never pass the stage because I decide it's not a great idea. Others morph and change. I think the more interesting thing to point out is how some things blow up into something bigger than intended. For example, Stillwater started out as a short story, then morphed into a 134,000 word, so far, epic. At Night, yeah, I'm still thinking about that one. Has a game plan, but I've set it aside for a while. I didn't intend to write a World War II/folklore anthology when I wrote Loup des Ardennes. I'm going to butcher that. But 9 stories later, still going, but also backburnered. Kira started with me being frustrated about writer's block, social media, and the state of writing, and morphed into something I want to explore more. So no, I don't really have anything I've always wanted to write and haven't. I just have a backlog of ideas that I haven't gotten to yet. Now, that's really fair, though. Honestly, J.M. Gooding has proven time and time again that he can take on literally anything, and honestly, it's one of the reasons why I love reading his work. So I truly believe that he will get to all these ideas. I think backlog is the perfect way to describe it. So I look forward to that. Next up, Elizabeth Hagenlocker says, I have so many ideas that are floating around, but I've struggled with for whatever reason. Actually, I know the reason. It's mostly to do with plot and not being totally sure where I want the story to go. I have lots of concepts and images and characters, but I get stuck on the granular stuff. I start a lot of things and then flounder a bit because I'm not sure how to move it forward and I hate it. Sometimes I'm able to talk it through with my spouse, though, and that helps me get out of the rut. Yeah, really good points here from Elizabeth. I think I've hit a wall with certain ideas, which is why a lot of my stuff tends to be on the shorter side, because it's like, well, I know it'll make it this far. But yeah, no, I think the point here about talking to your spouse or your friends or the community, that's really, really good, because if you do hit those brick walls, I have had such incredible experiences just having fun brainstorming sessions with other writers that I've met through Substack and otherwise recently, and that is really powerful. So never discount the power of a good brainstorming session if you get stuck. Next up, J. Allen Winchester says, "Oh yeah, where do you think the asteroid belt of the Imaginings universe came from? LOL." I have memos and notes scribbled of random ideas that just got filed in a drawer of the Mind Palace basement or got absorbed into another idea somewhere. Some I just couldn't let fade away, and they live rent-free next to the rest of the characters in the cosmos in my head. I actually have been debating making some use of those drifting asteroids in my Solar Wanderings portion of my Substack in the future. Still fleshing out how, but stories are too important that I can't just leave them forever. There's one story I wrote that felt awkward to continue because it was inspired by someone before Mrs. Winchester, and my heart just isn't in that place anymore. It was a romantic drama, yes, a romance story. I designed it to be a manga-styled comic, but even when I went back to the locked chest, I put it deep away in my long-term memory because it hurts from the way we parted ways. Probably one of the biggest heartbreaks of my life. I'm not sure I can do anything with it, which sucks because I had planned out over 20 volumes of plot. Wow. Yeah, that's tough. Jaden brings up a really good point here with his response because we have to recognize that, like, for example, when I came up with Life is But a Dream, I was in high school, right? And so I was a different person back then. I had a whole different worldview, right? And, as I mentioned, it was so many ideas happening at once. A big concern of mine is, does this story really work? Knowing what I know now about writing and storytelling, what elements can stay, what can go, so on and so forth. And obviously that's different than what Jaden was talking about here, but we have to recognize that ideas can change with us, right? So with this here, this is a tough one because of where it comes from, but I think if you really were to break it down into its base elements, you could find a way to restructure and change it so that it's based on who you are now and the person that you're with now. And I think that could still, revive this idea, and it would still be the same idea, just in a different form that has taken on, it's evolved based on what you've been through and where you are now in your life. So just my 2 cents there, but thank you, Jaden, for that wonderful response as always. And thank you to everyone for always jumping in and checking out these threads each week. Stay tuned for the next one this coming Wednesday, where you can share your thoughts and I will read your responses on the show here. Fantastic week this week. All right, next up, let's dive into our featured guest interview. And now it's time this week for me to sit down with author E.H. Lau to check in on all the progress he's made since we last spoke on episode 47 of the Saved as Draft podcast. He just recently wrapped up a comic series called Audrey the Unicorn Girl, and in our interview, we'll talk about how it came together, including the journey to find the right artist for the project. It's a fascinating behind-the-scenes look. And once you're done listening, don't forget you can find a link to purchase your digital copy of Audrey the Unicorn Girl in the show notes. For now, though, let's dive into this week's featured guest interview. All right, everybody. On this week's episode of the Saved as Draft podcast, I am very excited to welcome a guest to the show for the second time. So this week, we're bringing back author E.H. Lau to talk about some of his new projects, including an amazing comic series that he just wrapped up. So please welcome to the show, E.H. Lau. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Bradley. As usual, I think you can call me Edward throughout if you want. Glad to be here. Glad to be back. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yes, I will refer to you as Edward, no problem. I always lean towards the screen name of the guest to be safe. But yes, Edward.
No, it's a good idea for marketing.
Absolutely.
Nobody's gonna find the other one, right?
Right. That's very true. So yeah, welcome back to the show. It's really exciting to have you back. Now, for those who didn't hear your first interview a little while back, let's go ahead and start out by having you give us just a quick little intro and kind of your creative journey thus far and what brought you to Substack.
Oh, well, so I mean, I think I like to say that as a writer, I often like to try and take the slow and considered path, and that means like taking my time with a story and refining it as best as I can. And in other words, I like to nurture my stories before they hatch.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a whole bird theme I have. I have no idea why. But here we are. So, that goes with my Substack called the Hatching Stories. So,
Right.
yeah. And that's a bit about myself. With my creative journey so far. I mean, it's one of those things that's hard to encapsulate,
Yeah.
because, I've been writing on and off for like more than 2 decades now. Haven't seen much success, but here I am, on the show trying to promote some of my stuff to hopefully get some eyes on it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, still, two decades of writing is incredible. And everybody's creative journey, happens on a different timeline. I always say the most important part is just to keep going. So I
No,
love
I
that.
agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
I love that
It's
you're here.
also, I think, forgive the tangent,
Mm.
important to remember that, as much as I said seeing some success, it's also important to remember that at the end of the day, unless if it's a living, you're kind of doing this for yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So success is kind of what you define as, but also, of course, it is something to. So, I mean, I'm just trying to say that it's something personal that you got to figure out what it is you want from the hobby or, yeah, the creative side of things, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's actually a really good point, and I've definitely heard that advice, and I try to embrace that advice myself as much as possible. Where it's like, as human beings, we want to see the numbers go up, we want to see the success, we want to see that we have readers and fans, but ultimately, a lot of the advice that I hear and I agree with is that writing has to ultimately be something that you do for yourself and you do because you enjoy it, and then the success will come after that, right? But in the meantime, it's got to be for you. So I think that's a really good point that you bring up.
Yeah, well, I'm not even going to say that the success is going to come after that because I think we've all met people who we think should be more successful, including
Fair.
ourselves.
Yeah,
And
that's
it
fair.
just doesn't. But I think also at the end of the day, like, and that's part of why I say that I take my time with my stories and stuff because at the end of the day, I think it's me that's going to have to decide whether or not I'm happy with the work that I've put out, right? Like a story or something, right? And of course, I've had times where I rushed something for like a contest or something, right?
Hmm.
And and then I wasn't happy with it. So, I think that depends on how much you're willing to put in and how much you are willing to be patient with, your creative thing that you're
Yeah.
working on.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And that's another really good point too. Yeah, because it's like once it's out there in the world, I mean, yes, you can edit on Substack, you can edit the posts, and you can always take it down. But in a sense, once it's out there, it's out there. So you really want to have like your best foot forward, which is why I respect kind of your approach. And I also really like the metaphor of letting the stories incubate until they're ready to hatch.
Yep, yep. Don't steal my bird theme.
I will not. I will not. That is
That's
yours.
all I got right now.
That is yours. I just wanted to compliment it.
Thank you, thank you.
All right. So for my next question here, yeah, like I mentioned in the intro, you were last on the Saved as Draft podcast for episode 47, and this will be episode 76 if my numbers and math are correct. So yeah, it's been a little while. That last episode was in December of 2025 when I looked it up. So
Hmm.
yeah, given that we haven't spoken, since 2025, my next question is, how has 2026 been for you so far as a writer? What kind of, milestones have you accomplished, or what are you looking forward to trying to get done here in 2026?
I wish I had more to say, but unfortunately, I think as with the hatching theme here, I actually so I was trying to get another, as I mentioned the last time, Red Riding Hood saga story up, but that hasn't come out yet because it turned out to be a much larger story than I'd intended.
Mm,
I think we can go into that later in the podcast since you have a thing about what's upcoming later,
sure.
so I can talk more about it later. So,
Okay.
uh, unfortunately, not much, but I did find that thanks to I guess the community, like some of the prompts that you've had up and talking with Hazel, who's I think you've know who Hazel is.
Yeah.
I think listeners to this podcast probably know as well, so I don't need to go too in depth into that. But thanks to like you and them and the community, I have gotten a bit more into poetry, which surprised myself as well. So that
Oh.
yeah, that is a little, I guess, a little milestone, discovering something new that I might enjoy, right?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely amazing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's funny. When I first joined Substack, I've always enjoyed poetry and I've written it from time to time. But some of the first people that I met, Hazel being one of them, and then another poet by the name of V. Walker, they both encouraged me to, because I brought up that I was thinking about posting some poetry, but I wasn't really sure if, it's one of those things where I wasn't like very confident in my style, but they kind of pushed me to do it. And yeah, it was immediately, well received. And since then, I've really embraced poetry. So it's awesome to hear that, someone like yourself is kind of, jumping on the poetry train. How would you describe your approach to poetry? Like, have you posted many of them yet? Do you have like a style that you lean towards or anything like that?
So I've only really posted like one or two or three,
Hmm.
but and that's because I mean I've of course written a few more,
Hmm.
but like I don't think they were that good, so I'm not gonna post them. But I think I'm gonna sound really amateurish. But from what I know, I guess it would be free verse.
Hmm.
But that's like saying, oh, I write poetry. It's like I think most, from what I know, at least most people do free first. So and unfortunately, because I'm just getting into it right now, I don't really know anything about the meter and anything like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
free verse it is. But I
That's
think with my, I guess you can say, roots as a storyteller, I think a few of them more lean towards being like a story told in like poetry style rather than,
okay.
more of the, like I've read a few, like I think one of my favorites is Emily Dickinson's Hope is a Thing with Feathers. Like that one is very much an exploration of, what she feels hope is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas mine so far, that the ones that I've liked so far have more been like a sort of story at the very least. So if there's a
Interesting.
style, I guess you can say it's that.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So like, kind of totes the line between prose and poetry, or like a narrative poem, if you will. I'm not sure if that's like an official title for that kind of
I think
poetry,
that
but
actually is an
yeah.
official thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. I guess my other question then would be, do you ever focus on having any kind of like rhyme structure or anything, or is it more just, again, like a free verse, like kind of like you're not really worried about like a rhyme structure specifically. I'm curious.
Not so much the rhyme, but
Hmm.
I try to read it out loud at least
Oh,
to
okay,
make sure
right.
that it sounds good.
Yeah.
I do, okay, this is how amateurish I am. Whenever you look at a poem, right?
Hmm.
Or whenever I look at a poem, right? And yeah, you know how a lot of times, the writer is probably playing around with the structure or something.
Yeah.
So whenever there's a line break, right?
Hmm.
I pause. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to pause or not, is the thing. Um, so the way I write it is if it's a line break, I also do a pause and then make sure that it sounds good in the next line with
Yeah.
the pause. So maybe someone in the comments can tell us if you're actually supposed to read poetry with a pause with the line breaks or not.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear anyone's thoughts on that listening as well, who's experienced in poetry, because I myself, I mean, the best perspective that I can offer is that I think in a very similar fashion in terms of the rhythm of the poem. I use the line breaks as pauses. And just recently, I did a live Substack stream with Stefan Pasic, where we were reading poetry from around the community on the stream. And whenever it was my turn to read a poem, that's how I narrated it. Is I would use the line breaks as a reminder to kind of pause, and that there's supposed to be like a breath between that and the next line. So that's all I've ever known. But yeah, I'd be curious, yeah, as well to know. But it's yeah, it's very similar to how I approach it. So it makes sense to me. That's really, really cool though. I'm gonna have to check out some of your poetry. I don't think I've read it yet. But yeah, I like I said, I've really found a newfound love for poetry in general, both writing and reading it since joining Substack. So anytime I hear about somebody doing poetry, I definitely want to check it out. Um,
Yeah, I recently wrote one for, Hazel got married, right? So,
mm-hmm.
and then they had so they have their Inside the Sun and Moon collection that's out.
Right.
And then they have their upcoming Turning the Hourglass one, which I was lucky enough to beta read a bit of.
Mm,
So I actually
nice.
kind of took inspiration from that and came out with a poem called The Turning of the Sun and the Moon.
Ooh,
Uh,
okay.
so, so
Yeah.
yeah, I'm actually quite happy with that one if you're interested. And I think I did like a triple promotion there, so thank you.
That's impressive.
I know. Let's see how many of these I can fit in.
Right, right, right. Yeah, no, I'm actually going to make a note real quick. We will add that link to the show notes, obviously, since you'll be the guest in the episode here.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
yeah, I would love to share that in the show notes so people can check it out. What I love just by the title is how you reference not only the collection that Hazel has out, but also a little nod there with the turning to the new collection as well. So it's like a,
Hmm.
I'm curious, like, does the poem, are some of the themes of the poem like that sort of transition into a new chapter? Like, I'm just going off the title here, so I don't know. But I was curious if that was kind of part of the motivation behind it.
Uh, it, it was more to do with the wedding.
Okay,
Um,
specifically the wedding.
so
Right, right.
you will see that it has more to do with love, but also it does reference, yes, the turning of time and all that,
Right.
because that's like a theme. I don't know if you were part of the beta reading for that the upcoming collection, but it is part of the themes for that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I also took a look at the draft as a beta reader. So yeah, I'm recognizing some characteristics there. I love the concept how you combine those two ideas. I'm really excited to read that one.
Yeah, I
Um,
also very like coincidentally watched No Time to Die on that same weekend. That's the James Bond movie. I don't know
yes,
if
uh-huh.
you've seen it.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
they have this song We Have All the Time in the World.
Mm.
And that also helped, kick the inspiration a little bit because that one's also about time and love.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's I love when inspiration kind of appears right when it's needed like that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've also I can only think of one example off the top of my head, but I did a poem that also was very focused on like hourglass, like passage of time. It was called like Pretend We Have Forever, I think was the title.
Oh, I don't think
Um
I've read that one from you. I'm gonna look that up.
yeah, that's one I'm proud of that I think is very similar in terms of the themes that we're discussing here. But yeah, no, this is really exciting. I'm really happy to hear that you're getting into poetry. I feel like a lot of writers could do poetry. They just haven't tried it, you know?
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think it's easy to do and tough to master, let's put it that way.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. It's one of those things where I myself always had this preconceived notion that it was a very rigid, very like technical style of writing because there is, like the meter and kind of all of these different sort of formats of poetry that
Hmm.
exist. So for a large portion of my life, I wasn't even aware that free verse was an option. And so it was one of those things where I felt like I didn't have the skill set to write it. But something that I've learned, and I'm curious if you would agree, is that poetry is far more flexible than most people realize, especially if you just want to do free verse. Like, yes, there are very rigid structures out there, right, that people try to adhere to, and you can get very technical with it.
Hmm.
And obviously, spend a lot of time mastering it, but the bar for entry is much lower than I think most people realize. Like that there is like space and precedent for all kinds of poetry, even just the most kind of wild free verse, like stream of consciousness, for example. That's about as chaotic as it gets, right? So,
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And you
yeah,
know what? We are tangenting on a tangent, but
we are.
this actually, now that you mentioned that free verse, that it might actually make more sense since, before prose was a thing, like most stories were told in poetic form, because, it made it, before like people had access to books and all that, right? It made
Yeah.
it easier to remember and all of that. So maybe free verse was actually how most poems were written before all the rules came into play and all that.
That's true. I didn't think about that, but yeah, that would make a lot of sense. Also, I love the tangents. That's why I like to have kind of just, very free-flowing conversations on the podcast here because I feel like, with a lot of things, the most exciting, inspiring stuff are the things that lie off the beaten path. So I like, I don't mind the tangent one bit. Um,
I hope the listeners like them too. So we'll see what happens. We'll see
Yeah,
what happens.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, feedback is always welcome. Let us know in the comments, but I have a feeling that people enjoy the tangents when they're listening to. But all right, I'll reel us back in here. So
Thank you.
for my next question here, wanted to talk about the comic series that you recently wrapped up on Substack called
Oh, you mean the reason why I asked to be on the podcast in the first place that we've, avoided for like a good 15 minutes?
Yes, we're burying the lead, but like in a good way, because we got to talk about some really cool poetry stuff.
True, true.
But yes, we now we're at the point where I was going to ask you about the the kind of big release that you just had. Like I said, you just wrapped it up. It's called Audrey the Unicorn Girl. And yeah, let's just start off with kind of a basic overview of what inspired it. What was it about it that made you want to do a comic specifically? And then, maybe in addition to that, just a quick pitch about what it's about.
I'm gonna do the quick pitch first because
Sure.
if I don't do that, we are going to go on a tangent about, what inspired it and all of that. So I'm
Okay,
gonna do the quick pitch. So
sounds
for
good.
all of you listening, Audrey the Unicorn Girl is a slice of life comic featuring a perfectly normal middle school girl, except that she has a unicorn horn on her head.
Mm,
So the comic is, about her, tackling preteen life as a unicorn girl.
mm-hmm.
So it is very slice of life. And I guess I'll go into what inspired it, which is where the tangent starts because that's when you hear that it actually started out as my friend showed me some of his drawings. Um, and amongst them was what would become the basis for Audrey and another girl there. Um, and we were talking about it, and I decided, I'll take those two characters and see if I can, come up with a story. And then I took what was decidedly so I'm pretty sure that what he drew was not a not a unicorn girl, but like an Oni.
Mm.
An Oni, for those of you who don't know, would be is a type of monster in Japanese mythology where they have a horn on their head or two, depending. But yeah, so I'm pretty sure it was actually an Oni girl, but I took that and I changed it into a unicorn girl instead. And then I came up with, I don't know exactly what I was going through at that time, but I decided that I wanted to tell a story about, tackling some of life's, challenges. And I did that, through Audrey, which is why most of the stories are, let's put it this way, the horn is fairly incidental. Like, yeah, it figures into one or two of the stories, but that's like the hook, right, to get
Mm.
you in. And then the stories are really a more slice of life-ish, I guess you can say. Like
Okay.
I mean, I have one here where she's preparing to play baseball, right?
Mm.
But then she finds that she can't put the helmet on her head because, the horn's blocking it. So her father has to, take out the drills, and then if it fails because, he only drills a hole in it, but you can't put the helmet on with the you know what a baseball
Right,
helmet
right.
is
Yes, yeah, yeah,
actually.
yeah, yeah.
So then he has to drill a bigger hole, and I'm not selling it well because part of the fun is the visual gag. So
Sure.
that was a bad way to sell it, but that's the pitch that I sold badly.
You can only do so much because, like you said, it is a comic. The visuals play a huge role, especially in that scene specifically. But yes, overall, I could picture it. So I would say you did a perfectly fine job, given that you were constrained to audio.
Thanks. Yeah. I guess well, I guess I wanted to do a comic because it started out, as a visual thing.
Hmm.
And it's okay, so this is where the really long tangent comes in. Um so my friend actually didn't want to do a comic because he just draws for fun and he didn't want to do a comic because it's very involved, right? You have to, work back and forth with the writer if you're not the writer, and then you have to figure out all the panels, the word bubbles, etc., right? So then I had to go and find. I went through two artists before I found this one, so that was fun.
Hmm.
And that's that's money sunk, let's put it that way.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think that it taught me a lot. I think first of all, working with a different creator is pretty interesting, right? Because you
Yeah.
have to work with them. This is actually jumping onto your next question, I think, now that I think about it, about what working with a comic is like. Um, so I think we're just gonna jump there because I've ruined the pace, the flow.
No, yeah,
So we're
you're totally fine. Yeah, we can jump into the next question here. One follow-up that I wanted to ask though is, like you said, you went through multiple artists. Obviously you don't have to go into detail, but was was the issue like that, like was it a time issue? Was it a budget issue? Or like I'm just, for others who are curious about maybe trying to do a comic of their own, I'm wondering like what lessons did you learn about, how to choose the artist, and what kind of went wrong? I'm curious.
so the first two artists I chose because I saw their work on Twitter,
Hmm.
back when I was still on Twitter.
Hmm.
And I approached them to do it, right?
Hmm.
So the first one had to stop after the first chapter because they were in school that time and they found out that they didn't really have much time.
Mm.
And the second one, after doing the character designs, ghosted me.
Oh
I to
no.
this day
Okay.
have no idea why.
Wow.
So I mean, maybe they're blameless. I don't know. I have no idea why. So I can't tell you what happened there.
Yeah.
But then the third one I found because they were posting on Reddit looking for work, right?
Mm.
So I think the lesson, I guess, is try and find someone who's actually actively looking.
Right. Right. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then it's interesting that you mentioned Reddit too. I wouldn't have thought to go there to look for potential artists, but that makes sense. Okay. No, that's
Yeah, there's a bunch of threads here and there, like for like artists and writers to uh meet and advertise and whatnot. So.
gotcha. 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 Okay, cool. No, that's really interesting. But yeah, to your point, the next question that I had lined up here is, again, I've never written a comic myself. I love comics. I love reading them, and I'd love to write one day. So yeah, I was curious, like, what was the process like between the writing and then of course like the art, the page layout? Like, what did that look like?
So I think to start with, I think my two of my major inspirations for, comics would be good old Dragon Ball
Mm,
and then there's another little less known one named Doraemon from yeah, they're both manga from Japan. Growing
okay.
up in Hong Kong, manga was a lot bigger, especially back in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 90s and
Yeah.
early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so th those are my influences. And I think there's one thing I learned from the great Akira Toriyama and as well, or Toriyama Akira, if we wanted to go with the proper Japanese order,
Mm,
as well as Doraemon, is that you should, if unless if you intended it, you should keep the end of the page a page turner. So
mm.
so the last panel should be something that makes your reader want to flip to the next page or
Ah.
move to the next page.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that one's important.
Mm,
But then there's also like the flow, uh, throughout the panels. Because I've read some, web comics and not only web comics do this, but also like comics from like the big players like DC and Jump and or Shueisha actually that one and Marvel and all that, right?
mm-hmm.
Is you want to make sure you're also your panels and your word bubbles are flowing properly.
Mm-hmm.
So in in the West here we do left to right, top to bottom, right?
Yep.
So you never really want to interrupt that. You want to make sure that your what the you want to guide the reader's eyes so that not just from the panel, but also from like not just from panel to panel, but also the panel itself.
Mm,
So like oftentimes when I'm getting the drafts back, right?
mm,
I have to look in and go, the the initiating action should be on the left,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Right, right, yeah.
Yeah. And then you want it to flow to the next thing in the panel.
Mm.
Like for example, in one of the scenes, there's one of the characters is looking for somebody, right?
Hmm.
And then they hear a noise. The noise is on the right and the character is on the left, so that your the reader's eyes go from left to right and they
Right.
understand that they were surprised by something. What were
Mm.
they surprised at? Your eyes goes to the right. They're surprised by the noise.
Interesting. Okay, that makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. I really appreciate how you explain that because it yeah, it really kind of it helps me picture sort of the crucial nature of the design and layout of the page. Like I loved what you said about how, having that last panel be something that makes the reader want to turn the page, and then as you said with the other example just now, having the action flow in the same order as what they're reading, so left to right, top to bottom. That's really fascinating stuff. Okay, that's really cool.
Yeah. To add on to that though, there are some times where you do want to break that is because if you have like had a different panel showing like for example a character on the left talking to a character on the right.
Hmm.
Um, if the next panel has the character on the right talking first, you don't want to switch it up because then it kind of breaks the reader's immersion if you just randomly switch the order of the characters.
Right.
But in that case, what you would do is you would have the speech bubbles do the work for you so that the speech bubbles flow from left to right and top to bottom as much as you can.
Right. 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 Wow, that's so interesting. Yeah. 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 So, how smooth was that process? Like, for example, is this the first comic that you've ever worked on?
To this degree, yeah, let's say.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of us as kids have like, drawn a comic
Sure.
or here and there. But to this degree, yes. Yeah. It was an interesting process. I learned
Yeah.
a lot, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Uh and I think well for my process at least, because I was the one who was the creator and the overseer, for lack of a better word. Like I'm the one who was paying, right?
Hmm.
So basically, I had to be the one to make the final decisions, and on things like like we mentioned the layout and the panel flows and all that, right?
Hmm.
So from that, you have to kind of learn that if you're the one paying for it, if you're the one in charge, you have to be able to say, like, thank you for the idea, but I think my way's better.
Right. Right. Yeah. You have to be able to like make the call. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, if so here's a weird one that kind of depends on who you are. So it's also a process of figuring out what the artist is capable of and what their strengths and weaknesses are. So like some of the panels weren't exactly how I envisioned them.
Hmm.
Because as you work with an artist, you learn what they can and can't draw, or what they're weak at drawing, right? Or what doesn't work in their style. And that's again no shame to the artist or anything. We all have like strengths and weaknesses. Like even in writing, right? There are things that won't work in my style or that I'm not capable of writing because I it's just not something that I know, right?
Right. Right.
Right. So you have to learn to work with the artist and like maybe change the panel a bit. Like I think one of the panels I had a very specific angle in mind,
Hmm.
but the drafts that were coming back weren't very good at bringing out what I wanted to bring out. So I kind of had to take it away and think about it, and then like rework the angle so that it worked better in the artist's style and strengths.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah. A bit of a compromise there. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, you say compromise, but I think it overall worked better with the rest of the comic, if that makes sense.
Mm,
Because
mm-hmm.
the comic was already done in that style, right? So it's not like I'm gonna go and change the style for the comic for this one panel, right?
Right, that's also fair. Yeah. That's really interesting. I appreciate you kind of diving into the behind the scenes there. So you when you and I were talking, you had said that the series had a planned run that recently, of course, ended, so it's now complete. Now that it's finished and out into the world, how has the reception been thus far? And do you feel like you want to do another comic either in this series or a different kind of comic in the future?
I think so far people have enjoyed it. I am on this podcast to hopefully get more eyes on it.
Yeah.
Haha. But yeah, no, I think so far the reception has been good. The people who've read it have liked it, so at least as far as I know, no one's told me straight up that they didn't like it. So, you know,
Right.
um, what does it say? Ignorance is bliss sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
So hopefully, people who give it a try will like it. So yeah, the reception to it has been good so far. Yeah.
Good.
As for, I don't think there is going to be a sequel anytime soon. At least I think I ended the story on a nice spot. Let's put it
Oh,
that way.
okay.
But it's open-ended enough for like, because it's a slice of life story, right? Which
Right.
means it's kind of like it's just everyday life, and I kind of just picked a nice place to end it because I ran out of stories to tell for that set of characters.
Sure. Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
it's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah, yeah.
like, we'll see if any ideas come to me, but I'm not gonna force it. I think I ended it at a nice spot. Yeah. Actually, speaking of which, so the unicorn girl is was adopted.
Hmm.
I'm not going to spoil that too much. But yeah, they were adopted. And I think one of the interesting things was that I think the I think the first artist and some of the reception that I got while the comic was running was that the adoption was going to be more of a thing, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. Like, because you see
Right.
it all the time in a lot of stories, right? Where, someone's adopted and, inevitably that's like a thing, they want to find out who their, biological parents are or whatnot. And then it's a whole thing, right?
Right.
Whereas, for me at least, my thinking was that, I kind of wanted to show a different side of that where, there, because in real life, there are, people who are adopted who, don't care that much or for whatever reason they can't or won't or don't want to find out who their biological parents were, right?
Hmm.
So in that sense, I kind of just did not delve into that too much, and
Hmm.
that was an interesting a contrast to the story I had planned and what some of the readers were expecting.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting too, because yeah, like as writers, we obviously have the story planned out in our head, but readers, of course, will bring their own expectations and kind of like latch on to things that maybe we didn't expect. Um,
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Yeah. So now, would that topic, like, kind of her exploring her, where she came from or who her biological parents were, is that something in your mind that could be a new story, like, down the road, or is that something you always want to leave a mystery?
Right now, I'm not gonna say,
Okay.
that it's set in stone, but right now, I kind of, I don't even think it's a mystery. That's what I think.
Okay.
I think it's just done. I think Audrey herself is fine,
Hmm.
with not knowing. So it's not a mystery. It's just not a thing. Let's put it that way.
Right. I mean, I really like the idea of that too, because it's like you said, typically with these kind of stories, that is usually, kind of a significant focus at some point. Like it's I don't want to say it's a trope, but it's like a trend with these kind of stories where that becomes a focus. And so for you to kind of, create a character who's not just, for whatever reason, not interested in that and more just kind of, focused on, whatever she's got going on in her life now. I think that's really interesting and I think that's unique. So I definitely respect that creative decision a lot.
Thank you.
That's really cool.
Uh, Speaking of going on a tangent, I think I was watching a Nerd Sync video. I don't know if you know who NerdSync is, but that's a different YouTuber, and he was reading an article about The Pit. I don't know if you would know what The Pit is, but The Pit is a medical show. Uh, and that one, and the article was an interview with Noah Weil, I think. That's
Mm-hmm.
the star of The Pit.
Okay.
So the Pit is a show that each season. I haven't watched the show myself, so if I'm wrong about these details, my apologies to any Pit fans out there. But anyways, so the show is apparently a medical drama that focuses on the shift, like one shift every season.
Oh,
And every episode is like 1 hour of that shift.
wow.
So it's like
Okay.
that old show called The 24, but
Yeah.
a
Yeah. Yeah.
medical drama.
Mm-hmm.
But unlike 24, their goal is to make it as realistic as they can to, how the medical system currently is in the USA, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because it's based in Pittsburgh, hence the pit. So,
Got it. Right.
uh, so it's set up to be like that. But in the article that the YouTuber was reading, yes, this is third-hand information at this point, but I did go and check out the article. It is a real article. I'm not making the article up.
Okay.
Um, so Noah Weil was talking about how some some of the fans can, because we see all these different TV shows over the seasons where they like set up a mystery and then the mystery gets unraveled, like Lost and all of those other shows. It's like have kind of set up this mystery box way of watching a television show, right?
Right.
So some of the fans of the pit were kind of doing that. They were like, "Oh, is this character going to show up again and do X, Y, and Z, or whatever, right?" Trying to figure out like what's the big answer to the mystery, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as Weil said, that's not the point of the show, right? The point is a shift in a shift
Right.
of doctors, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he said something that kind of stuck with me. I'm probably gonna be paraphrasing, but he said, "There's a story that we write, and there's a story that the fans make up in their heads."
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And sometimes when a viewer or reader or whatever make up a story in their heads and it doesn't match with what the writers got, sometimes there's this weird like dislike of the actual story that comes out because of that.
Mm, mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
as a reader and watcher myself, I try not to write the story for the writers, let's put it that way.
Right, right. No, that's really fascinating, and that's definitely a phenomenon that I have seen or heard about. There's countless examples. Yeah, um, I think in at this point in my life, I'm similar to you where I've had friends and people in my life who they're always trying to figure out what's going to happen next. They're like hyper focused on like guessing the ending or guessing what's going to come around the corner. And for me, as a writer and as a creative, I kind of try to sit back and just enjoy the ride and and just kind of see where it's going without, as you said, creating these expectations in my mind.
Mhm.
So that's really interesting that yeah, that example is fantastic. And again, I like it when a story tries something different. So again, I feel like what you did with Audrey is really interesting there, and honestly realistic, because it's one of those things where you know sometimes people just that's just not their focus. Like they're not like that's not something that they're interested in pursuing, or number two, like there's no path towards getting those answers, and again, they may not want them. And so I feel like
Mhm.
especially for a slice of life, that's a very realistic thing to kind of explore. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, thank you. Of
Yeah.
course, I don't have firsthand experience with this. I just heard a different YouTuber talking about it another day, and that's kind of also why decided to I was inspired to, well, actually, I forget how the events happened because it's been years. Either I had already set out on this path and they confirmed it for me, or they did that and I set out on this path. I have no idea which way it is.
Yeah, either way, we came to the same conclusion. Yeah. That's good
Mm.
stuff. That's good stuff. So, the comic, it's available on your Substack. Is the entire series available to read right now, or is it something where like the first chapter is free and then you need to be a paid subscriber, or how do people access
Oh
it?
yeah, no, the whole thing is free to read, so
Okay, cool.
dive in and hopefully let me know if you like it or not. That's to you and the listeners at home.
Yeah, feedback is welcome.
And
Yes.
I'm hoping that by the time this episode of Save as Draft goes up, I will have the uh digital storefront set up so that, if people want to support me, they can get like a PDF or the CBZ versions of these of the comic.
Good,
So
good, good. Okay, great. Yeah, yeah. And then, of course, we'll have a link to that in the show notes as well if it's live in time for the episode's release, which it sounds like it should be. So we'll,
I hope so.
yeah, yeah. If it's ready, it'll be in the show notes. That's a guarantee. If not, you can bet that I'll be restacking and promoting it when it is ready.
Oh, thank you.
Do you have any plans just down the road at all to do like a physical version of the comic that people can buy, or you want to keep it digital?
I would love to do a physical version.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to do some research right now into how
how that
that can
works.
happen
Yeah,
because that not like I have to that means I'd have to find a printer
yep,
and then I'd have to figure out how to get funding for it. I've seen
right.
some other comic creators use Kickstarter.
Hmm.
So maybe it'll be that. And then of course I'd have to figure out shipping. So
Yeah, it's a
yeah,
lot of logistical factors. Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
And then now that I think of it, if I have to do all that, then I have to figure out how to store those books as well.
Right, right. Yeah, it quickly adds up. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a lot. But I definitely do want to do in the future, but I'm not gonna guarantee anything right now, but I'm hoping. I'm hoping.
Okay, okay. Cool, cool, cool. No, that's great. That's great. Yeah, and one more time for listeners, that is Audrey the Unicorn Girl, available now on Substack, free to read, the full comic. So definitely check that out. Again, link in the show notes. Now, for my next question here, I want to come back around to what you mentioned earlier, which is, of course, your ongoing series inspired by Red Riding Hood. You had mentioned that there was something in development there. So, yeah, since we last spoke, I'm curious, like, what's the state of that series, and where are you heading with it?
All right. So the next story I have up is actually concentrates on or is a mashup, I guess, of a lot of the different tales from 1001 Nights with
Okay,
Scheherazade as the lead.
yeah.
She, of course, meets at this point, Red is kind of a supporting character in the saga because her story arc kind of completed with the second arc. So this is the third arc,
Hmm.
and this set of stories focuses more on her in other people's lives, if that makes sense.
Right,
Kind of
right.
like
Okay, yeah.
building up the saga of Red Riding Hood as she continues on her quest to find a cure for Sleeping Beauty.
Hmm. Mm-hmm. Fantastic premise. I love that.
Thank you. So this next part has read in Scheherazad's homeland that I'm gonna keep vague because it's a fantasy land. So
Sure.
I'm keeping it a vague fantasy land. I know others might disagree with me doing this, but I think, well, the way that fairy tales work is that you know, they don't come from one place tech normally, right? They come from a lot of, especially since, borders and all that have, been rewritten throughout history, right?
Hmm.
So, like, I mean, you can say that there are, European fairy tales and, Middle Eastern fairy tales, East
Hmm.
Asian fairy tales, stuff like that, right?
Right.
So I think it makes more sense in this case to not define the land too much, if that makes sense.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
But anyway, so it takes place in, a sort of Middle East slash Persia inspired land. I know they're different, dear listeners, but the history of 1001 Nights is that's where like that's kind of the area that the stories came from. So apologies if I'm offending anyone, but I made the call. But if you want to comment below on how it can be done better, you go ahead. You go ahead. I am willing to read it as long as it is done in good faith.
Fair,
Uh,
totally, totally fair.
yeah. So Scheherazade, of course, is guiding Red Riding Hood around to try and find. So Scheherazade herself is a storyteller, uh, and she decides to become Red's guide in exchange for Red telling her, her stories so that Scheherazade can later use as storytelling material.
Hmm.
And part of that, on their journey, they find out that, Aladdin, which I hope is the more Arabic pronunciation of Aladdin, has, a wish granting jinn. And that's where the story goes from there.
Okay.
It is a bit, I have found it a bit difficult to write and get it all together though, because this one turned out to be a lot more expansive. The plan was to like kind of do retellings of, uh, Aladdin, of course, Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, and then a few other stories. But I found that that was kind of too much filler, if that too much padding, because
Sure.
that wasn't the story I wanted to tell.
Mm.
But then to tell the story that I needed or wanted to tell, I needed to set up the entire backstory of Aladdin. So I had to retell the entire thing and then get to the core of it. And that kind of makes it hard for, especially if I'm on like posting it to Substack, right? Then it's kind of like, how do I split this up, or do I want to split it up?
Mm. Hmm.
Because if because readers are fickle, and that's not their fault. There's so many things online. I can't blame them.
Right.
Uh, but if like, but if one part of it, is basically set up for the next part, right? How do you get them to stay, right? So
Mm.
that it's kind of difficult to judge in that case. Long answer short, that is the next story that I have planned for the Red Riding Hood. And it was kind of, parts of it is kind of inspired by how I read the Aladdin story as well as the Scheherazade framing story. I didn't read the entire 1001 Nights because that is a long long book.
Right, right.
And so I mean, I'll give an example, but the Scheherazade story, very basic. You know that the king caught his wife having an affair. Uh, so then he executes his wife, and then he decides to, take a new wife every day, and then have them killed the next day, so that he can never be betrayed again,
Wow, yeah.
until it comes to Scheherazade, who decides to then enact her plan to you know, tell stories to keep the king from murdering her. And then
Mm.
after 1001 nights, I'm gonna tell you some details that might be not safe for work. So for those of you listening, if you have this on the speakers, don't have this on the speakers. Uh, but so what happens is the Scheherazade actually, so the retellings we hear, it always sounds kind of innocent, right? It always sounds like, oh, she tells a story and then the king spares her and whatnot, right?
Right, right.
But reading the framing story from the Burton translation, at least, what happens is a bit more nuanced. Let's keep in mind that the king is actually marrying and bedding all of these people.
Mm, mm-hmm.
So what happens is that, so Scheherazade, first of all, actually gets her sister involved, in that her sister is the one to ask her to tell a story, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then throughout the entire framing story, right? They're just the king, and the two sisters are just going in this continual loop of, oh, tell me a story. cliffhanger next night, etc., etc. And
Hmm.
then we find out that by the end of the 1001 Nights, Scheherazade had actually given birth to two children.
Mm.
That means that means that that means that they were having relations and the sister was kind of just there.
Mm. Right, right, right. Yeah, that's what that implies. Yeah.
Yeah. And also at the end of the story they kind of have so the king decides to repent basically after or not repent or just stop. Yeah, okay, repent, I guess we'll say. After seeing, after being convinced to spare Scheherazade and marry her for real.
Hmm.
Um, and it's treated like he's the greatest king ever.
Mm.
And I'm going, this is the same person who literally just held a woman hostage and her sister for over 3 years and then
Yeah.
killed plenty of women before that. And this is apparently the greatest king in the world.
Yeah, yeah, wild. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So after reading that, my retelling of it is a bit more dark, let's put it that way. It doesn't explicitly, depict, any of the sexual assaults or anything like that.
Hmm.
But, it doesn't shy away from the fact that that is what happened, right?
Hmm.
And that does make it a bit harder to write, to try and decide which parts to talk about, which parts to change you know, if I should or shouldn't change it. So yeah, it makes it a bit harder to write.
That makes sense. Yeah, yeah. It sounds like there's a lot of considerations there, and then, I mean, you bring up a really good point about how the original story played out. So it's interesting that with the retelling, you have an opportunity to kind of take a different approach. But yeah, I have to imagine that's a very delicate balance that you have to strike. So it makes sense that this one would be a bit more difficult. It sounds like than some of the other retellings you've done.
Yeah, I mean, even for the Aladdin one, it was a bit. I ran into kind of the same issue because again, this is gonna sound really out there, but so Aladdin first meets not meets but sees the princess by spying on her in a bathhouse.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a little bit already. And
Right.
then what he does is he then to stop the princess from getting married to a prince, he has the jinn kidnap both of them. He locks the prince in an outhouse
Wow.
and then has the princess sleep beside him in his bed. But to prove that he is noble and won't initiate any relation, he will put a sword between them. And that is treated as the most noble thing on earth.
Wow. Yeah. Very interesting from a storytelling standpoint. Yeah.
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 So that one I actually just outright changed because did not need to I did not need to confront that in the story when I was already going to confront the stuff in Scheherazade's backstory.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, 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 yeah. Again, though, a lot of factors to consider. I mean, I always really admire authors like yourself who kind of take this approach of, taking something that's, classic or, like, other authors use like mythology and stuff, and kind of finding ways to retell it. And ultimately, finding ways to like bring it into the modern era with, maybe a different way of thinking in terms of how the story should play out. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's really interesting. Do you have a rough timeline as to when this next one will be out, or is it again, as we discussed, are you still just kind of letting it, get ready to hatch, if you will?
Yeah, I'm nurturing it. I'm hoping sometime this year, so like
Okay.
maybe in September or something like that.
Okay.
But unfortunately, I was hoping for the first half of the year, and that didn't happen. So I'm not gonna promise anything right now.
Hmm.
I'm just hoping that it's not like a 15-year wait like for George R. R. Martin's next book here.
I have faith that you will get it out much quicker than he theoretically would if he was writing it.
I hope so. I mean, to George R. R. Martin's credit, though, he is dealing with vastly more complex plots.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. But okay, that's a perfectly fine answer, and I think totally fair given all the elements at play here. But I am looking forward to checking that out when it does release, because yeah, I really enjoyed during your first interview talking a bit about your approach to kind of retelling stories like this. So again, it sounds like you're doing some really great work there. Um,
Oh, thank you, thank you.
for my next question here, I wanted to also briefly touch upon some of the essays that you do. I know we talked about that in your first interview as well, but specifically, you published an essay recently called Hope in Humanity's Potential versus Despair at Our Sins. And I'd love to talk about that piece specifically because it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was one of your longer essays, if not your longest one yet. And yeah, it was kind of a real interesting deep dive. I'll let you describe it. But yeah, for the benefit of the listeners, can you tell us a little bit about the your approach to an essay like that, and why you have that as part of your publication as well?
Sure, yeah. Well, I guess for the viewers, for the listeners at home, so to start off with, the essay is centered around the themes of Mobile Suit Gundam Char's Counterattack. That's a fairly famous, I guess, f anime film from the Gundam series. Um, it and what happens is I'll tell you the conversation that sparked the seed for that's a mix of metaphors. I'll tell you the conversation that planted the seed for me wanting to write this essay. I was talking to my friend one day, you know, and some you can pick and choose, but some news event happened that was pretty bad.
Hmm.
I forget the exact one because it's been a rough couple of years.
Yeah.
So so after hearing that, I said, sometimes I just want to fling an asteroid at humanity, at Earth. Sometimes
Right.
I just want to fling an asteroid on Earth.
Right.
And that kind of sparked the whole idea to write this essay because in the movie, one of the main villain, Char, flings an asteroid at the Earth because in his mind, humanity has polluted it so much that he wants to drive all of humanity into space.
Hmm.
I'm for the listeners' benefit, in Gundam, humanity has my some portion of humanity has migrated to space colonies. So that's not too far-fetched. He can
Okay.
actually so humanity will survive an asteroid at flung at the Earth in space.
Okay.
Uh,
Right.
so the themes of the movie in the movie, Char, the main villain, as I said, initiates a plan to basically fling asteroids at the Earth to induce a nuclear winter, make it uninhabitable, so that the Earth can heal. Uh, because humanity has polluted it over the many millennia, I guess, of human history,
Hmm.
as well as the Earth Federation has also been oppressing the space noids, the people who live in space.
Hmm.
And those are, in my essay, those are all the sins, the accumulated sins of humanity that Char is despairing at, basically.
Okay.
Because in his mind, right, this is the only way to get humanity to move forward.
Right.
Because so this is what I would like to call the final entry in the Gundam tetralogy, which comprises of Gundam Zeta Gundam and Gundam Double Zeta and Char's Counterattack.
Hmm.
So you kind of see him, especially in Zeta Gundam, trying to work with humanity, right? Trying to get them to move past the the oppressing of the space noids and the environmental damage that they're doing to the Earth. Uh, but none of that works. So here, this is his this is his final despair. He has moved past the line of being able to just do things peacefully, and he's basically despairing right now. And that's what leads him to use all of his political power and charisma and all that to enact what is even in his he himself calls it a wickedly evil plan, right?
Hmm.
So to just toss an asteroid at the Earth and wipe the slate clean. Meanwhile, Amuro, our protagonist, his arguments are that, uh, humanity still has potential to, learn and grow and try and better themselves. Uh, and then part of the conflict is whether or not, Amuro is right or Char is right. And of course, there's no resolution to that because how can you ever resolve something like that, right?
Hmm.
But uh, rewatching that movie and watching that movie kind of encapsulates, my own inner conflict at how, I wanna believe that, humanity can, move past its problems and solve the many conflicts that we have. But, sometimes you just turn on the news and you go, might be better if we just wipe the slate clean, huh?
Right, right, right. Yeah.
So that was why I I decided to analyze the movie that way because, ultimately it is a conversation with myself about how, I am sometimes in despair over, you know, our collective sins, but I still want to believe that humanity has the potential to fix its problems. And I would argue that, even if we fail, it is at least better that we tried than to have wiped out vast amounts of humanity.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's wow. That is powerful, powerful stuff. I love, you know, I love the themes there. I really appreciate you kind of describing the film itself too and how that inspired the essay. Um, I had read a portion of it. I need to go back and finish it, but yeah, it really jumped out at me. In general, I've always really loved that aspect of your publication where you kind of dive into topics like this,
Oh,
in
thank you.
that format. So yeah,
I
so
hope you're
that
able to, I don't know if you've seen the movie or not, so, but I hope you're able to kind of uh, understand it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I've seen some Gundam. It's one of those series that I really want to devour all of it. Like I love the whole concept.
Mm.
I'm a big fan of just anything involving mechs and like mech combat and stuff like that. I really love that kind of fiction. So it's on my list, but you definitely got me super interested in this one specifically. And yeah, it makes a lot of sense. There's some very universal themes there, which definitely explains why you felt inspired to talk about it in
Yeah.
further detail. Yeah.
And this movie came out the year I was born, so you
Wow.
know how you know how old these themes are. Um,
But yeah, very universal. That's very
yeah.
interesting stuff.
I do recommend at least watching the original Gundam trilogy of movies before watching this movie though,
Got
because
it.
it provides a lot more context to Char and Amuro's character and rivalry and relationship.
Okay. Yeah, no, that
As I
makes
mentioned,
sense.
it is part of a tetralogy, but those two those two are good series still, but they aren't as important to Char's counterattack, is what I'm saying.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Yeah, no, I always try to respect the best way to experience something like that. So I appreciate you mentioning that detail.
Yeah, also the for the Gundam fans out there who might think that I'm being blasphemous, but I am recommending the original Gundam movie trilogy rather than the series. Okay, here's another tangent. Sorry to anyone not interested. So in Japan, they still like making what they call compilation movies
Uh-huh.
out of series, out of like anime series. So what they'll do is they'll like, take a whole anime series that might be like 26 episodes or whatever, make one or two movies out of that, using like recuts and new footage and whatnot. So
Right.
I'm recommending the movie trilogy, which is a compilation of the original series over the original series, because in the original series, uh, now I might be getting some of these wrong because I don't have the history in front of me, so I'm going off the top of my head. But the original series, they wanted it to be a bit more for children because back in the day a lot of mech anime was used to sell toys and whatnot. And this was
Right.
like around the time. This Gundam is one of the first what we would call real robot anime, where it takes a more grounded and realistic approach
Hmm.
to the ongoings. Whereas something like the some of the I guess the first mecha anime like Mazinger Z and Getter Robo were very much super robot, sorry. And they were basically the physics weren't meant to be realistic. And they were more like superheroes rather than a more grounded mech feeling to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
with Gundam, they kind of had to compromise a little and so they had like this gritty war story, but they also had kind of like elements aimed at children and all that, right? And with the compilation movies, the creator was actually able to cut out a lot of the stuff that he felt was a bit too aimed at children, and then also added a lot of new footage to compensate for that. So it's actually, in my opinion, like the definitive version of the original Gundam.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That makes sense though. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. No, I appreciate the context. And yeah, like I said, I always want to experience stories in the order they're intended and kind of get the, as a writer, I want to make sure that I get the order right. So that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. No, I know what you're saying. I do agree with you that a lot of the times the correct order is good. I will say, however, that sometimes I'm not going to dissuade people from jumping into an entry just because sometimes you need like the more modern context before you can appreciate the stuff from the past.
Sure, sure. No, that's a good point too. Yeah, yeah. There's always like some nuance to that. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Like, I mean, like nowadays, if I were to introduce someone to Batman, I'm not going to tell them to go back to the
Right,
1930s comic
right.
where Batman still kills people and all that, right?
Right, right. That would be quite shocking compared to how it is now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a very good point. So, yeah, this actually brings me to my final question here, which, over the course of our interview, we've talked about your comic series, your more traditional, just kind of serial series with Red Riding Hood, and then of course now we just got through a conversation about some of the essays that you do. So you have a really cool spread of different types of content and storytelling and just writing that you do. So for my final question, I was curious, how do you maintain that balance between, all these different types of projects? And how would you recommend to other writers, taking a similar approach as you, where they can kind of embrace multiple, say multiple genres or types of writing and storytelling? How has that balance kind of come together for you over the years?
Uh, Honestly, I don't know if I'd recommend
Yeah.
people do this because well, okay, let me put it another way.
Mm,
For those of us on Substack, we are trying to build an audience,
hmm.
and it is it will if you are jumping around like this, it will be hard to maintain that readership. Um, because experimentation takes time, right?
Yeah.
So if you go and do something else, you know, you might not have a new piece ready for, consistency reasons or for consistency, and you might not have like with the comic, right? That took like a few years to get done because I had to go through two artists before I found the one that uh worked with me all the way to the end.
Mm.
And then also had to, actually do all the drafts and revisions and all that. So I'm not sure I would recommend it per se if you are trying to build. something on Substack, right? But I do think that it is good, I think, to explore. Like we were just talking with the poetry, right?
Yeah.
It's good to explore as a creator. You can find, things that maybe you never knew you would get into. So wow, I went on a weird tangent, but I do think diversifying your content is a hard thing to balance. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think for myself, right? I've I've kind of just accepted that this is the kind of creator that I am, that I do want to go and, I don't necessarily want to stick with one genre all the time. So, I go out there and I try to, or I just figure out what I want to write next and I do that, rather than try and stick with the form, the genre, the format, etc. It's kind of just what I'm interested in at the moment.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, so unfortunately, that is not in any way a good answer to anybody looking for a more concrete answer. So my apologies there.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I think the takeaway, and you brought up some good points here, is that obviously you don't want to spread yourself too thin to where you can't maintain everything. But there is merit, and this is in my experience too. There's merit in allowing yourself to explore other things, and to broaden your horizons as a creative, because you may find that you're really passionate or really good at something that you hadn't considered before because it wasn't necessarily in your lane. So I always like it when writers kind of, diversify a little bit. So I was curious of your thoughts there, and I thought that was some good points you brought up.
I forgot to bring this up. You asked if I had any other upcoming projects
Mm-hmm.
besides the Red. So I am currently writing a series called Amelia the Painter. This one has a weird origin where Hazel wrote a series of stories about like an orphan having to choose between the sword, the scythe, the scroll, and the pickaxe, and that was like going to determine their career path in life. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but then I riffed off on that, and I had an orphan, not the character in her story, in their story, not the character in their story, but the character in my story. She chooses to her own path, which is the path of the paintbrush. Right. So that is a new series that I'm working on, and through that, I kind of found inspiration from painters over the years, like Lily Osmond Adams is a Canadian painter who did pastels and landscapes. And then there's Leonardo da Vinci, of course. And then there's Hokusai's daughter, Oi. So uh, getting so I'm using those kind of painters as jumping off points for very loosely inspired stories, like for the upcoming one, right? There's talk about how like, she so Amelia is taken in by Lily. Um, and Amelia, of course, wants to be a painter, but she sees that Lily has to work. And so there's talk about how like, being a creator, you still have to survive and support yourself.
Right, right.
And then in the one inspired by Leonardo da Vinci, this did not happen to Leonardo as far as I know though. How he's forced to basically use his talents to develop war machines, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's like a pair or a metaphor, I guess, for having to do something for work that you don't want to do,
Right, right. Yeah,
which
that's
ties back
yeah.
all the way to a pre-conversation that we had before we recorded this about how there's a certain new technology in our lives that is forcing its way into our work as well.
Right, right. Yes, it does apply there. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, that sounds really interesting. So that one you said you're already working on?
Yes, so I have the first two chapters out, and
Okay.
the third chapter I'm hoping is out this week.
Good stuff.
Um, and I'm tying this back to your final question in
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes you just got you have an idea and you just gotta, explore that genre, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or that story. And that's how it is for me, I think. So yeah, nope, I don't have a good way of balancing things. So I'm gonna end my answer there because I've gone somewhere.
No, but that's good though. Yeah, yeah. I think honestly, reflecting on it, it's a bit of a loaded question because I think there really isn't an answer in terms of how you balance it. But I think the point of the question and what I took away from your answer is that it is important to leave space for yourself to pursue those new ideas and to try new things because it can really lead to some of your best work, at least from my experience.
Yes, that's what I meant to say the entire time. Thank you.
Well, yes. Yeah, that brings me to the end of my questions here. But it was wonderful having you back on the show. I mean, so many exciting things going on. Obviously, we'll have links to all the stuff in the show notes here. And yeah, I'm really really excited for people to discover the comic series and everything else you got going on. And yeah, who knows? We'll definitely have you back on the show at some point in the future here. Once we have some more stuff to talk about. But in the meantime, lots of really great things to dive into. And as always, I really appreciate your time, my friend.
Thank you. It was great being on here again, and I appreciate your time as I appreciate you giving me the time as well.
Of course, anytime. All right, a big thank you again to E.H. Lau for coming back onto the show. And now, a look at next week on Substack. All right, my friends. So next week is when the last set of contractors are coming out to my house here to finish repairs in the basement after the insanity of the last 2 months that I've been dealing with. That means that after this week, fingers crossed, my peace should finally return and some normalcy should come back, which I desperately need. Now, that doesn't mean next week will be quiet, though. We'll start with a new power-up prompt tomorrow, Sunday, July 5th, and then Monday the 6th, I'll be launching my brand new meditation and mindfulness podcast for writers called Dream Drafts. That one will launch into early access for paid subscribers, and the following Monday it'll be available to all. As the week goes on, I'll be working on my entry for Tamsin G's Cozy Quill writing competition, which I'm super excited about. We'll also be hearing about the winners of the Emerald City Ghosts Summer Short Story Contest, and I'm excited to see those results in particular since I did in fact submit a story of my own for that 24-hour challenge. Aside from all that, I'm planning to get things moving on Devine, so you may or may not hear about a release date for the next chapter of The Order of the Pawn next week too, but time will tell. And obviously, elephant in the room, I need to get back to my cosmic horror novel. The last couple of months really threw me off track, but I've been thinking about it and I've got some new ideas, and I'm hoping to have some updates on that soon as well. Stick with me, I promise it'll be worth the wait. And that's not everything, but the rest of the stuff that I've got going on here, I can't talk about just yet. It's got to stay behind the scenes. So stay tuned. In the meantime, I know that the entire planet is scorching right now, so I hope that you're all staying as cool as you can and staying hydrated however you can. Remember to drink your water throughout the day. And of course, my friends, keep telling your stories. Your work is enjoyed by so many people, myself included, as you can tell, in this very episode. What you do, your writing, your stories, it makes the world a better place, and we need it now more than ever. So thank you for listening and for sharing your work. I'll see you all next week, and this is Bradley Ramsey, signing off.
Bradley, what are you doing here? Are you hiding from the Hobbitses?
No, I'm hiding from Finton, guys. He's trying to pry that unwritten story out of me. Bradley, are you in here? Just come out. I'm not interested in Life is But a Dream anymore. You're fine. Oh, thank God. I was worried you'd want me to turn it into a Devine thing. Aha! There you are! I must admit, you know me far too well. Now, let's talk about the next Devine novel, Life is But a Dream. Oh no, I'm getting out of here. You can't run from your own characters, Mr. Writer. I'll find you!